Something happened in Geneva just this past week that every African policymaker, regulator, and digital economy professional needs to understand clearly. An African head of state has been placed at the very top of a new global body that will attempt to shape how artificial intelligence is governed across the entire planet. Sitting alongside the most powerful technology companies in the world, alongside leaders of the United Nations, alongside heads of state from the most digitally advanced countries on earth. That is genuinely significant. But it comes with a question that nobody in the celebratory coverage of this moment is asking loudly enough. Does a co-chair position at a table with no binding rules actually change anything? Or is this another beautifully designed room that Africa gets invited into right after the decisions have been made? It is not a cynical question. It is the most important question in African digital governance right now. Because the difference between those two outcomes is the difference between representation and influence. And they are not the same thing. Here is what you need to know. Africa has attended enough multilateral governance tables to know that a seat in the room does not automatically translate into a voice in the decision. The architecture of the institution, the enforceability of its conclusions, and the specific mandates of its African members are what determine which side of that line this commission lands on. So let me tell you exactly what this commission is, who Africa has on it, and what the inaugural meeting actually revealed about what is going to be hard. Come on. Key point 1. What the Commission is and what Africa has inside it. The AI for Good Global Commission was launched on July 2nd, 2026 by Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, Salesforce Chair and CEO Mark Benioff, and ITU Secretary General Doreen Bogdan Martin. The inaugural meeting took place on July 8th in Geneva during the ITU's AI for Good Global Summit. It is a 44-member body bringing together heads of state, industry CEOs, and leaders of UN agencies, explicitly designed to bridge the gap between the people who build AI technology and the policymakers who are supposed to govern it. Africa secured 8 foundational seats. President Kagame is not just a member, he is co-chair. The African Union has a seat. Nigeria's Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy, Dr. Bosun Tijani, joins as a founding member. MTN Group and Orange, 2 of Africa's most significant telecoms and digital infrastructure companies, sit on the commission alongside Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, Google, Qualcomm and Anthropic. Namibia and Nigeria are both represented at the government level alongside Rwanda. This is not a token presence. Africa's representation at the founding of this body is substantively more significant than it has been at most comparable multilateral technology governance moments. President Kagame, co-chairing, not just attending, is a structural appointment that gives Africa a formal role in setting the agenda, not just responding to one. Key point 2, the honest limitation, no binding deliverables. Here is the detail that the celebratory coverage of this commission is consistently soft-pedaling. The commission has no binding deliverables. At launch, there are no enforcement mechanisms. There is no liability framework. There is no formal authority for its conclusions to compel any action from any member state or any company represented at the table. This is not unusual for a multilateral body at its inception. The ITU, UNESCO Broadband Commission, which this commission explicitly builds on, also began as a high-level advocacy and coordination mechanism rather than a regulatory body. And it did produce real influence over time, shaping connectivity targets, broadband policy frameworks, and investment conversations that had material effects on African digital infrastructure. Key point 3, the most unresolved issue, compute access. The most substantively unresolved issue from the inaugural meeting, and the one African policymakers should be most focused on, is compute access. African policymakers and technology leaders have increasingly argued that the continent's AI ambitions depend not only on digital skills and connectivity, but also on access to high-performance computing resources, trusted datasets, and modern AI infrastructure. These concerns were reflected in discussions leading up to the Geneva meetings, but no concrete mechanisms emerged from the inaugural session. This matters enormously because it is the upstream dependency that determines whether everything else the Commission discusses is accessible to Africa or not. An African government that wants to build a national AI strategy, train local AI models on African languages and African data, and deploy AI systems that serve African citizens needs compute. Without meaningful access to high-performance computing at sustainable cost, the conversation about AI governance becomes largely theoretical for most of the continent. So, given all of that, the real representation, the real structural limitations, and the real unresolved priority, what should Africa actually do with this moment? The strategic insight. Here is the strategic reframe I want every African policymaker and digital economy professional watching this to hold on to. The AI for Good Global Commission is a genuine opportunity and a genuine risk simultaneously. The opportunity is that Africa has, for the first time, a co-equal formal position at the founding of a major global AI governance architecture. Not as an afterthought, not as a development beneficiary, but as a co-architect. President Kagame co-chairing this body means Africa has a legitimate claim to shape what this Commission prioritizes, how it operates, and what it decides to measure. The risk is that this governance moment passes, as too many have before, with excellent communiques, genuine goodwill, and limited structural change for the communities the Commission claims to serve. The difference between those two outcomes is not in what happens in Geneva. It is in what African governments, regulators, and technology communities do between now and the Commission's next formal meeting. Representation at inception is the beginning of the work, not the result of it. So here are 5 specific things Africa must push for to convert this seat into structural influence. The practical takeaways. 1. Push compute access to the top of the Commission's agenda and keep it there. The gap between Africa's AI ambitions and its access to high-performance computing infrastructure is the single most concrete and solvable upstream dependency in this entire conversation. The Commission includes Amazon, Nvidia, Microsoft, and Google, the companies that control most of the world's AI compute capacity. African members should be pressing for specific, funded, time-bound commitments on compute access for developing country AI development, not general aspirational language. 2. Insist on binding output mechanisms, not just advisory recommendations. The Broadband Commission model is a useful reference point, but the pace of AI development requires faster, more enforceable governance than broadband policy ever did. African members should be pushing for the Commission to develop at minimum a set of measurable standards and a named accountability mechanism, something that creates a consequence for non-compliance, not just a recommendation to comply. 3. Coordinate African positions before Commission meetings, not during them. 8 African seats are a significant bloc. 8 African seats that arrive at a Commission meeting without a shared, pre-agreed set of priorities are 8 individual voices in a room of 44. The African Union's representation on the Commission and the Smart Africa AI Council should be the coordination mechanism, convening African members, aligning positions, and arriving at each meeting with a clear, unified set of asks rather than a set of individual national interests. 4. Use the Commission's legitimacy to accelerate the AU continental AI strategy implementation at national level. One of the most valuable things a high-profile global Commission membership does is create domestic political space for action. African governments that have been slow to fund and implement national AI strategies now have a direct, named accountability. Their government sits on a global AI commission that has identified AI governance as a priority. That accountability should be used. 5. Measure the Commission by its outputs for the 2.2 billion people still offline, not by the quality of its communiques. The Commission's own stated focus is bridging digital divides and ensuring AI becomes a tool for solving global challenges, not deepening inequalities. African members should be publishing annual scorecards on whether the Commission is delivering measurable progress toward that specific goal, keeping the institution publicly accountable to the mandate it launched with. Conclusion. Africa has a seat at the table, a co-chair seat. With 8 founding members, a private sector presence, and an AU voice in the room. That is real. It is more than has existed before at the founding of a major global AI governance architecture. But a seat is where the work starts, not where it ends. The question of whether this commission becomes the body that finally ensures AI's benefits reach the 2.2 billion people still offline, most of whom live on this continent, will be answered not in Geneva, but in what African members of this commission do between meetings. If this video gave you a clearer way to think about what Africa's presence at this table actually means, share it with one person in your network who is helping to shape that presence. Subscribe and turn on the notification. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video, which is showing on your screen.